Hey folks, this is Scott Houchin, coming to you from doing my morning coffee at the LaGrange Library in LaGrange, Kentucky. Um, just for the record, LaGrange is my hometown. I was born and raised here. And on that note, I write books about LaGrange, short stories. Today I'm plugging the book, my latest book, The Train Still Rolls Down Main Street. And of course, for those of you, many of you probably already know this, but trains roll down the main street of LaGrange. It's become a classic tourist item in the town. Here's what I wrote about the book first thing. This book was written for the people of LaGrange, Kentucky, my hometown. For better or worse, we grew up together and loved each other as we did. Those words are very true. I can't say it any plainer than that. There was a lot of goods and bads, but we had a great time. Reading from the book, here we go. Since the day I was born, the train has been rolling through our town. Presidents come and go, wars are won or lost. University of Kentucky and U of L have winning or losing seasons, but the trains keep rolling through our town. In fact, the train has kind of made LaGrange famous. Now people come from all over America to see our little town with the tracks running down the middle of Main Street. And when a train comes through the town, out comes the phones and the cameras to document the event. Funny, but I can still remember standing in front of Head's drugstore talking to the newspaper delivery guys when I was about 13 years old about baseball when the train started coming through town. And it was a pain in the butt because the train was so loud you could not hold on a conversation with people. It was the same thing on the bus going to school in the morning, sitting at the tracks waiting for the train to finally get through town so we could get to grade school. It always seemed like it took forever. To us kids growing up in the Grange, usually a train was more than a pain than a historical event, and we assumed that all kids had a train running down Main Street of their hometown. This is my second book of short stories about LaGrange. My first book about LaGrange was a success. In writing these books, I hope to connect with folks in my hometown, some of whom I have not spoken to over 40 or 50 years. It was meant to be a homecoming of sorts, and it worked for me. And apparently, from the nice comments I received, it worked for many of the locals that I grew up with. So, just like the trains that keep rolling through our little town, I keep writing stories about what it was like to live and grow up in LaGrange. The more I write, the more I remember. And just like the trains that roll through our town, the stories keep coming. I hope you enjoy the book. Reading from my book, the first chapter is about the name LaGrange, my hometown. I have always liked the name of our town. At first I thought it was French for the farm, and then I heard it was French for the barn. Most folks thought it was either or both. Kind of makes sense. Anyway, the true translation of the name is the barn. Growing up in LaGrange, which is the town I grew up in, I did not think there was any other towns with the same name. It was not until I heard the ZZ Top song, LaGrange, that I realized that there was more than one LaGrange. And how cool was it to have a prominent, world-class, famous rock and roll band name a song after your hometown? The song came out in 1973 and was close enough to the Woodstock era in my youth that the music meant a lot to me. The actual name of LaGrange came from the Revolutionary War hero Marquis de Lafayette. His house in France, pardon my French, the Chateau Lagrange Lenoir, at one point was shortened to LaGrange. The house, chateau, in and of itself is a remarkable story. But about our LaGrange, Lafayette visited Westport, Oldham County area, in 1824. And a few years later, in 1827, the town of LaGrange was named for Lafayette. Names like Louisville, LaGrange, Versailles, Fayette County, etc. are located throughout Kentucky. We tend to forget just how important the French connection was to America during the Revolutionary War days. Probably there would not be a United States if the military help of the French and leadership of the Marquis de Lafayette did not come. The French also had a revolution just like us. They adopted the colors from our American flag, and they gave us the Statue of Liberty. Meanwhile, the Brits, came back to America, invaded our country again, and then burned our capital in Washington. I still do not know why Americans are so infatuated with the Royals. And we started calling French fries freedom fries. No words other than, I don't get it. Next page. By the way, Houchin is a French name, pronounced Houchin. I discovered this while living in Boston. Several of the folks in my house were from Quebec, where they speak French, and they informed me that it was a French name. Who knew? Anyway, during the 1800s, the name LaGrange became very popular in America, and according to Wikipedia, there are 13 towns or cities in America called LaGrange. In my book, I write about many of the towns called LaGrange and some of the histories of those towns. I'm sure there are a lot of very interesting stories about the various LaGranges in Kentucky or in America. I am also sure there are a bunch of stories about the LaGranges in France, Virgin Islands, Haiti, the world. It's a name that is all over the world. However, these are the high points that I could find in the book. The good news is none of the LaGranges have a railroad track running down the middle of the town, nor do they have a Head's drugstore or a Jerry's Corner store. Our LaGrange is our town, and there may be others out there with the same name, but there's only one LaGrange, Kentucky, our hometown. When I'm doing book fairs and things like that in LaGrange and around LaGrange, I will be selling this book. And most of the people I end up talking to were not born and raised in LaGrange. They moved here, most of them about 30 years ago, some of them as short as 10 years ago. And they are interested in the various stories that happened in LaGrange long before they moved there. And this is one of the most popular ones of those stories. And I'll read from the book. The fire that almost burned down LaGrange. As I have stated too many times, in my world, the only thing that has not changed in Oldham County from when I was a child is the main street of LaGrange, with the tracks running down the middle of the town. It almost changed. In 1960, the Griffith Theater in downtown LaGrange was burned to the ground. The whole downtown of LaGrange was almost destroyed. I was 8 years old, going on 9, and I remember it well. D.W. Griffith is a hero of LaGrange. D.W. was from Oldham County, and he was a movie director, and a good director he was. When he started directing movies, they were silent movies, and they lasted 10 to 15 minutes. He changed all that. His movies were much longer and emotionally moving with strong narratives. D.W. pioneered the concept of large, sweeping scenes utilizing hundreds, if not thousands, of extras. No one had ever done anything like that before. Movie theaters across the country were filled to standing room only to see his pictures, movies. And then he started Hollywood. Hollywood did not exist before D.W. Griffith. He packed up his film company from New York City and moved to Hollywood, California, and that is how it is where it is now. World-famous Hollywood came into existence. In the early 20th century, his name was as famous as any present-day movie star or director, and not just in America. He was famous internationally. D.W. was from LaGrange, and he was the father of Hollywood. Therefore, when they opened a movie theater in downtown LaGrange, it was called the Griffith Theater. It was located at 123 East Main Street, LaGrange, where the wedding dress store is now. As stated, I was only 8 or not going on 9 years old when it was operating, but I believe I saw at least one movie there, The Blob, starring Steve McQueen. I remember that because in the movie there is a famous scene where the locals are watching a movie in a theater just like the Griffith in The Blob attacks the theater patrons while they are watching the movie. It's pretty cool stuff. Anyway, on the night of January 17, 1960, at approximately 1:35 a.m., Cecil Atkins sounded the alarm about the fire. Cecil was the funeral director for the Atkins Funeral Home, which was located where the LaGrange Hotel is now on Main Street. Cecil was preparing to make an ambulance run when he heard an explosion across the street, and he saw flames coming from the Griffith Theater. He sounded the alarm. Tom Day was the first fireman to arrive at the scene, and our volunteer firemen fought the fire for hours. Eventually, over 60 firefighters were involved, as well as numerous fire departments from Oldham, Henry, Jefferson, and even Shelby counties. After the explosion, which started the fire, there was 2 more explosions that increased the fire potential to possibly burning down the entire downtown of LaGrange. Several other structures were seriously damaged, including Gatewood Drugs and Day's Jewelry Store. The second explosion caused the fire to spread to Day's Jewelry Store and the third explosion blew off the roof from the rear of Gatewich Drugs. It was a bad fire. It even affected the railroads. The several L&N trains were held up for hours due to the fire. The fire was that big. Finally, around 6 in the morning, when the fire was brought under control. This is such a good LaGrange story. At that time, there was a restaurant in LaGrange called Sadie's Canary Cafe. We always called it Sadie's. I ate there many a time. When Sadie heard about the fire, she rushed down to her restaurant and opened it up to feed the firemen. There were about 60 of them, and Sadie fed them all at no charge. It was on the house. Locals helped with the cooking. LaGrange was such a small town back then, and everybody wanted to see the downtown saved. Basically, the town was saved by volunteers who risked their lives. For many years, I was always told that no one was really ever accused or indicted for the terrible fire. According to the Old Emira, this is not true. Once the story got out about 3 explosions, everyone concluded it was a fire probably set to collect insurance money. It was not clear to everybody why whoever did this fire had to make it so big, since it almost burned down the entire downtown of LaGrange. Local authorities were very suspicious of the 3 explosions. However, as a child, I always heard that no one was ever caught for starting the fire, which was incorrect. As the Old Emira states, people were caught and they were prosecuted. You'll have to read that part from my book. It's just like a Law and Order show. I mean, people flipped. They brought people in and they flipped on each other, and it's a good story in and of itself. Some of the classic parts about this story is about Sadie's. Our town was saved by people that lived there. They were all volunteers. Probably the best way to describe how the townspeople felt is an open letter from Sadie, the owner of the restaurant, to the Old Emira. And here it is. It was a real pleasure to find this letter when I was researching this story. To all the swell fellows that risked their lives to control the fire early Sunday morning, January 17th. I want to thank each and every one of you, for I was only a few steps down the line. I was told to present my bill to the city of LaGrange for the 63 breakfast. I served you with the help of my pajama and uniform-clad sister Sue, Chief Egg Flipper Jim Armstrong, Toastmaster, dishwasher, and mop boy Paul Ray Bell, and head dishwasher Major T. Doty, and the dishwasher Raymond Hayes. The bill has been marked paid in full by Sadie. One of my favorite stories that I write about in the book is about Christmas. It's also the last chapter in the book. It was pretty special. Here it goes. The best Christmas tree in town. My dad was not really all that much into Christmas. Yep, he did the Santa thing when I was very young, but basically, he just watched Mom do most of the festivities. And she did a lot. One thing he did do was drive around town a couple of nights before Christmas and see the lights. It was a family affair. We all jumped into the car and Dad would drive us around smoking his pipe, which was a treat. We all loved the cherry tobacco that he stuffed his pipe with. It was all part of the festivities. Around we would drive. The courts, 5th Street, 4th Street, the new subdivisions on the west side of town, the north side of Highway 53, and he would drive around for an hour or two, and if we were really lucky, maybe a little snow. It was family and it was fun. One place we always had to drive was by Radcliffe's funeral home to catch a view of the huge evergreen tree that they had in the front yard. During the holidays, that tree was very tastefully done with Christmas lights. Not overdone, and usually whatever was the latest in Christmas lights was on display at the Radcliffe tree. I chatted with Linda Radcliffe about the tree, and she stated that her dad, Dick Radcliffe, became the funeral director in 1949. At that time, the tree was only about 4 feet tall. However, over the years, the tree grew, and her dad took a real interest in decorating the tree. He went as far as to make sure that all the lights were evenly spaced. There was no 2 colors next to, below, or above each other. In other words, he took the tree lighting very seriously. And as the tree got bigger, the whole tradition got larger as well. All of the LaGrange locals waited in every December for the Radcliffe tree to light up the Radcliffes to light up the tree. I'm not exaggerating when I say that in many ways the tree probably summarized Christmas to LaGrange more than anything else. Technically, they had an Oldham County tree at the courthouse, which was in LaGrange. It was nice, but everyone knew the real LaGrange Christmas tree was at Radcliffe's. Presidents were killed, leaders were assassinated, cities were burning. America was in an endless war, and thousands were killed, but what could be counted on the feeling of peace and goodwill to men while looking at the Radcliffe's Christmas tree. It stood every year, and it was lit every year. It was the one thing that did not change in LaGrange, Kentucky. I left LaGrange in 1983, but I never forgot the tree. Once when I was studying photography at the University of Louisville, I learned a photography technique which was basically making a negative of the image. Thus an image like the tree, all the grays were taken out and was only totally black and white. The tree with its lights and the Radcliffe funeral home behind it made a very powerful image using this technique. I did the photo and doctored it up and gave it to Gene Armstrong, who was the editor of the Oldham Mirror, and he was very impressed and ran a copy of it in the front page of the Oldham Mirror the week before Christmas, sometime in the mid-70s. 20 years later, I'm thinking of buying a house in Denver, Colorado. It is your basic standard bungalow, 1,500 square feet, 2 bedrooms, 2 baths, deck on the back porch, and in the front, a glass-enclosed front porch with a small front yard. However, directly to the left of the front door sidewalk is a large evergreen tree that dominates the whole side of the yard. At the time I bought the house, it stood about 15 feet, and I commented to my wife about the tree in LaGrange that that tree reminded me of. We bought the house. The tree was not the only reason we bought the house. Location to restaurants, routes to work, hospitals close by, etc., money. There was a lot of reasons we bought the house, but one of the reasons I bought the house was the tree. The tree grew. It grew a lot. It turns out that the tree's roots were directly over the sewage pipes going from our house to the street. The tree's roots started out over the sewage pipe, along the trees and the roots of the sewage pipe were one. Basically nonstop good food and nourishment for the tree. The tree grew a foot a year. The sewage situation cost me a considerable amount of money, as in getting the roots removed from the piping. And of course they would grow back in a few months. Just to keep everything flowing, I had the tree roots removed every 2 years. Meanwhile, the tree was still just kept growing. By mid-2010 decade, the tree was well over 40 feet tall, and its circumference was double when it is when we bought it. I believe it was even larger than the Radcliffe's tree. It snows in Denver. It snows a lot. People do not ask, will it be a white Christmas? It's a given. The real question is, will it be snowing so hard that we will not be able to drive around? Even with a Subaru, I was in Denver when the Christmas Day plans of skiing in the high country were canceled because it was snowing so hard. Sometimes as much as a foot or two of snow, and almost none of the few restaurants that are usually open on Christmas Day are open because the employees could not get to work. So, like I said, it snows a lot in Denver. The good news about lots of snow in Denver is that my tree looked beautiful. The branches held huge amounts of snow, and if you were unlucky enough to be walking on the sidewalk past the tree and it let loose some of the snow, you would be completely covered in snow, including snow down your back. In other words, the tree was absolutely beautiful when it snowed. Postcard beautiful. I love that tree. So did my neighbors. Usually during the holidays, I was up in the high country doing ski patrol or just having fun. I was not usually in Denver, but my neighbors asked if they could have a tree lighting on my tree for Christmas, mostly for the kids. Of course I agreed. So they rented a cherry picker and put a string of lights on the tree. A couple of days before Christmas, the whole block would show up and sing songs, have food, basic block party stuff, and light the tree. I have been told the kids loved it, and so did the grown-ups for that matter. Unfortunately, I was in the high country, usually in the high country, and never saw it happen. But I did see the string of lights that became a permanent part of the tree. And of course, the neighbors were very nice to me as a result. When I lived in that house, the price of houses on my block tripled. Thus, my house went being a place where I could do whatever I wanted to with my yard, cutting grass, etc., etc., to a place where I had to pay attention to how my house looks. I believe it's called curbside appeal. After I retired in the early 2000s, before the tree lighting, I became a bicycle leader. And my motto was, if it's nice enough outside to do lawn work, then it's nice enough to ride bicycles. So let's ride. And that's what I did. I did not exactly have a picture-perfect yard, and I did not care. There were yard Nazis on my block, and the comments went from subtle jokes to serious complaints like, clean up your blankety blank yard. Unfortunately, this sort of complaint started becoming more and more a problem as yuppie after yuppie bought the houses on my block, and the prices went from $250,000 to $500,000 to $750,000, and they're well over $1 million now. Nothing makes people nicer than the belief that they are losing $100,000 on their house because my yard was not nice enough. However, after I let them use the light the tree, these complaints just evaporated. It all changed. Mysteriously, suddenly while I was off treating patients on Ride to Rockies, I would come home and see that my yard had been mowed. There were other nice things that the neighbors did for me, and it all worked out. I liked it, and apparently so did my neighbors. This happened for years. For reasons I will not bother you with, aka money, I ended up selling my house. It was hard to do. I really loved that house. The snow, the tree, the roses, my boys, the cats, the tulips from Amsterdam, the rabbits that lived under the tree, etc. I used to cross-country ski right from my back door to downtown Denver. Same thing with bicycling. The local bike paths were closed and I could do 30 to 40 miles on my bike paths directly from my back door. It was hard to sell the house, but there is this thing in America called money. My neighbors were nice about the whole thing, but really there was not any parties, just verbal goodbyes. The house was sold. For some reason, the new owners cut down the tree. Even though I was now living 1,000 miles away, I immediately heard from my neighbors about the tree being cut. As could be expected, I had absolutely no way to no say in the whole thing. Unfortunately, it became rather apparent to me that my neighbors missed the tree a lot more than they missed me. That tree meant something to them, something more than just to get together. It was the one time in the year when mom, dad, kids, neighbors, the whole block together, and there was a feeling of community and even peace. After all, this was Colorado, home to 3 of the worst mass shooting incidents in America, actually in the world. Columbine, the movie theater in Aurora, and the King Sleeper in Boulder. Unfortunately, as I'm writing this book, yet another horrible killing spree in Colorado, this time in Colorado Springs. If the lighting of a tree can somehow make Americans feel at peace with each other, light all the trees. I love my tree, and I love driving by the magnificent tree at Radcliffe's. No matter what was going on in the world, we had our tree and our small town and each other. It was the Grange's Christmas tree, and the Grange was our home. No more words. This is the end of my second book about